All right, fam. What's good? What's good? So, I was having a conversation online, and um, the brother made a few good points. And I don't want to go into that conversation, but the conversation led to why do I believe that the chosen people theory and Hebrewism, not just Hebrewism, but the Abrahamic faiths in whole, we're going to come from my perspective of Hebrewism, is a program, but especially the chosen people program, because Christians believe they're the chosen people, Hebrews believe it, Jews believe it, and even Muslims believe it. But first, let's get into what mind control is. So, mind control is an extreme form of social influence used to indoctrinate an individual into the attitudes and beliefs of a group, which is usually political or religious in nature. So, it's really just getting people to choose a sect or a side or a way of beliefs, we could say. And a program comes from, oh, I didn't write it down, but it comes from basically a public notice, something that is written publicly, a proclamation or edict. So what does that mean? The king or the rulers would send out a written proclamation, a written edict, a written program. He would announce it to the people, and the people had no choice but to move this way. And if they didn't, they were it was enforced through various punishments and usually death. Um, so now we can say, well, first, Alexander the Great tried to conquer the world, and he was being very successful at doing it until he realized the world is too vast to conquer. So instead of trying to conquer the world physically, he got the idea to conquer the minds of the people. If you conquer their minds, then you have conquered the world. Now, why is that? Because when he went into Egypt, he learned, of course, wherever you go, you're taking their highest spiritual texts. And he learned that all is mind and the universe is mental. And see, this information is available, but let's say this information was out there, but it was not available to the masses. So the masses think on a mundane, physical level. If I want to change something in this physical, earthly plane, this earthly world, I need to manipulate the physicality. I need to dig a hole and plant seeds to and water it to grow crops. I need to manipulate the earth to get what I want out of it. But the education of the nobles and the higher ups were different, and they learned higher pieces of knowledge and higher wisdoms, and Hermeticism was one of them. And understanding that the universe is mental and everything is dictated by the minds of the people, well, then there is no need to conquer the world physically. If we can conquer the minds of the people, they will give us the world, because they will act and think and act the way we tell them to. So, how is the mind programmed? Where the mind is programmed through symbols, trauma, and repetition. Symbols, repetition, and trauma. So, back to this chosen people theory. Well, first of all, we learned while studying the Bible that there are different levels of study of the Bible. And the most mundane level is just looking at it and saying, looking at it at this physical story. The highest level is the spiritual inner interpretation of the Bible. So it's coded, and it's coded. You can't even, well, really, it's not. Let's not say it's coded. Let's say there is a story being put forth that is misinterpreted to be taken as a physical story, but more so is a story about the inner workings of the being to transform him into a higher version of who he is, or a higher version or level of being. So the stories are put forth, but everything inside of the story is about the functions that are inside of you. Now, with that being said, if everyone takes this story on a physical level, then I can manipulate the world physically. But if everyone takes the story on a spiritual level, mentally, and use it for self-transformation, you can't stop a person for transforming themselves from a human into a Christ. No one can be stopped from doing that, even with all this manipulation out there. And even with that being said, this information has been out there, but nobody has looked into it. So now let's go into how did we gain this program? So first of all, they tell us that we were slaves. We were slaves. They didn't allow us to have no books. They didn't allow us to read, nothing. We were just able to work and get our asses whooped if we didn't work hard enough. Now, first of all, that's trauma. So automatically, we were being prepped for programming through trauma. Now, and how do we know that's true? Because they told you about buck breaking. So they would go and take the biggest, the biggest slave out of the yard, the strongest slave out of the yard, the most headstrong out of the yard, and they would humiliate him in front of everyone and kill him. They would beat him. They would rape him. They would torture him and then kill him in front of everyone. And through seeing that trauma, what they saw was a symbol of everyone. And soon what would happen? Then the mothers would teach their kids not to end up like that guy because they love them. They love their kids. So I'm going to teach you how to not end up like the bravest, strongest, most headstrong slave that I ever seen, because even he couldn't change this situation. That's programming that taught them to be subservient. So now we have these quote unquote slaves, prisoners of war, who are not, they don't have any form of intellectual entertainment, let's call it that, nothing to feed their minds, which we know that we weren't just slaves. We were inventors, we were kings, we were chemists, we were shamans, we were all these things. We knew how to manipulate herbs for healing. And so we were all these things, and then we were just cut off from all things intellectual, let's say, and spiritual. So now our minds are reaching for something more than just being out in the field, working all day, putting stress on the body. we want something more than that. And our only break was Sundays while the slave masters were in church. And so, one thing we have to understand, we have to stop underestimating people and the reach of their understanding. Because right now, as a Hebrew, a Christian, or any of these Abrahamic faiths, what we believe is that they took our spiritual religion and we took it back. Like, think about that. Like, come on, people are smarter than that. And especially the people that understood that they're conquering minds. They're not conquering people. They're conquering minds. So they took every piece of knowledge, every ancient scroll you had, every writing that you had, and they even separated you from families. So they broke the families up, and now you're in these different plantations with people that don't even speak the same language. And then the only book you're introduced to is the Bible. And even more than that, the only form of religion or spiritual, upliftment, so to speak, that is available is this Christian religion. So Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, the only time you get rest during the daytime is to listen to the preacher preach. And after so many decades or so many generations of not being able to read the Bible, you are repeatedly, repetition, listening to this preacher preach. Now, through your trauma or a break from your trauma, it's still trauma. Now you are getting the repetition of this religion, Christianity, and their perspective of it. So then, after so many decades of the repetition of listening to this religion, now you get one person who gets to read the book. One slave master allowed one slave to read the book. At least is how the story is told. But now when he reads the book, he's like, this is about us. We're the ones that have been in slavery for 400 years. We're the ones that are being tortured and tormented in a land that is not our own by people who don't speak our language. This is talking about us. But see, he's already been programmed with this through the repetition. Now, this is the only book he reads, and he identifies with it through his own traumatic experience. He identifies with the slaves in the book. He identifies with the oppressed in the book because he's being oppressed. So now he says, we're the people of the book. Oh, they're not the people of the book. They weren't in slavery. We're the people of the book. We're the Hebrews. Now, through that, he's now reiterating the program, because now he's going and teaching the people, the slaves, we're the people of the book. Read this. We're the ones that have been taken from our land, put into a strange land, been oppressed by people whose language we can't speak, and they're ruthless. All these things that are happening in the book, it happened to us. It doesn't happen to anybody else. This is happening to us right now. We are these people. So now he's enforcing the symbol of these people in the book through the trauma and the repetition again. So now move forward, and now we're in the United States, and the United States uses Egyptian symbology for a reason. And now we say we're not supposed to study through the perspective of Christianity. We're supposed to keep the old law. We're supposed to keep the law. And if we keep the law, then God will send the Messiah to rescue us. We have to turn back to the old law. Now, this is just a continuation of the programming. Why? Because one, when you figured out that you're the people of the book, the people accepted Christianity still. So my parents were Christianity. Most people's parents were Christians. And now we could say, because Christians practice their religion a certain way, now we could say, well, they're not doing it right. They're not doing it right. Now we have to do it like this. We have to turn back to the old law. We have to worship the old law. And in that, now this is creating a further division. Why? Because now we're turning against our families, saying you guys are Christians, you're not doing it right. But also we turn to Hebrewism and we say, well, I'm a Hebrew. I believe in that the Messiah has come and he's going to return. And these other Hebrews are saying, I'm a Hebrew. I believe that we're only supposed to read the Torah and the Messiah hasn't come yet. But through this all, we haven't thought about the perspective in which the book was given. So if we rewind it all the way back to when the slave masters were putting out, not putting out, but allowing slaves to sit on the steps of the church, take rest, and listen to them preach, their perspective was Jesus is coming back. An external Christ is going to return, and everyone is going to see him in the sky at the same time. And this external Christ is going to eradicate evil and bring in the era of the Christ, or the era of the Mashiach. Now, you move into Hebrewism and you say Yahusha is going to return, or Yeshua is going to return, or Yeshaya is going to return. Or if you are Torah-based Hebrew, you say the Messiah hasn't come yet, but the Messiah is still yet to come. He's still going to come. So all of this is the same perspective. The same perspective. It's saying that if I go by this book good enough, and all these people go by this book good enough, then an external Messiah is going to come. But two things that we haven't considered. We haven't considered that this is the only book that was in arm's reach and presented to us during the time of our most traumatic experience in the history of our people. So this is the only piece of literature that was available to us during the most traumatic time of the history of our people, but also when it was given to us, it was read to us in a certain way. So what do I mean by that? When you go to the library, you don't read a fiction book as if it was a biography or nonfiction. You read fiction with a certain perspective, and you read nonfiction with a certain perspective. You read math books with a certain perspective, and you read science books with a certain perspective. Without the perspective, you cannot unlock the keys of the book. Meaning, if you read a science book like it's a nonfiction book or a fiction book, and you just read through the story, you just read through page by page until you get tired, and you pick it up the next day and you just read page by page until you get tired. Pick it up the next day. You're not going to learn anything from that book of science. You're not going to learn nothing. That's not how you are to approach a book of science. So if you read a book of fiction like it's real, you will go out into the world being delusioned. And if you read a biography like it's fiction, people will tell you like, nah, man, Malcolm X was a real person. Martin Luther King was a real person. That wasn't fiction. That really happened. But I read it in the book. This is how I read books. No, you need the perspective. That really happened. It really happened. So what I mean by that is you have to have the perspective in which the ancients approach these ancient scrolls in order to unlock the ancient wisdom. And so the ancients told stories in a way to give you wisdom, but keep you interested, so to speak. But they understood that those characters in the story were functions and things that took place in your own body. So when they read about their deities, they knew that Ganesha was in the skull. They knew that Osiris was in the brain. They knew that Horus was in the brain. You know, they knew that the eye of Horus was the third eye. They knew that. They knew that. So nobody had to tell them that. They just knew this. But now we are reading this spiritual book from a physical perspective, and therefore we can't unlock the riches of the wisdom in it. And so so now, even when they say, or let's use me, even when I say, oh, I'm a Christian and I go to church and I see all these violations of the Bible, they're not doing it right. And then I say, oh, we're supposed to keep the old law because that's what the book actually says. And then I go into the old law and I start keeping the old law and doing the old practices of the people. I'm still waiting on an external Messiah to come. But, you know, luckily for me, and the grace was that I had teachers that told me these festivals are here to teach us and remind us that this is how we're always supposed to act. And from there, I started to understand that, oh, this is an internal process. The Hamashiach is a goal of the Torah. So to become a Christ is the goal of the Torah. The goal of keeping the Torah is to become the Christ. But if we don't understand that all is mind in the universe is mental, then it's going to be hard to look at these books and say, this is something that's supposed to happen within me. Abraham is supposed to cross over within me. What does that mean? How do we do that? If God said, I'm gonna raise up one like Moses from among your people, then what does it mean? What does that mean? Is one of us supposed to become the next Moses? Is one of us supposed to become the Christ? When Christ says, it is written in your law, you are God's, and the scripture cannot be broken. But what does that mean? We're not just going to gloss over that. Psalms 82:6, ye are God's. We're not going to gloss over that. That sounds like the most important shit in the whole book. You are God's. And, you know, just to go there real quick, when I say that I am God, that you are God, I'm not meaning this personality that I have. I'm not meaning, you know, Philip is God, Philoenosis is God, but I do understand that there is a personality that has been placed upon my soul. And so the true essence of who I am and the true essence of what we are supposed to be has been drowned out by my own personality, my own ego, my own likes and my own dislikes. But there is a part of me that is pure because it is God inside of me. The kingdom is inside of you. So that's the part that I identify with, is the purest part of myself. When you have a hologram and you take a small piece of the hologram, let's say you have a hologram of a man. If you take the toe of that man and pull it off the hologram, inside of that piece that you just taken off is the whole piece of the man. And we know that God is whole and he cannot be anything but whole. So inside of you is the whole of God, even though there is a source of all things. So there is a source of all things, but you are connected to that source through the piece of the hologram that's inside of you, which is the wholeness, because it cannot be fractured. God cannot be fractured. So you are God. And this is what Christ or Jesus or Yeshua or Yahusha was saying. Isn't it written in your word that you are God's? Isn't it written there? I and my Father are one. So when I say that this chosen people is a program, that's only a perspective. The perspective that people take when they approach that chosen people theory, they think that, oh, because we went into slavery, we're the chosen people. Oh, because we've held on to the Torah the longest, we're the chosen people. Oh, because I've asked Jesus into my heart, I'm the chosen people. No. You're chosen when you choose to become Christ. You're chosen when you choose to become Christ, when you're not waiting around for Christ to come, because that's not the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ is inside of you. There, you know what I'm saying? There may have been a man that walked the earth. Does it matter? I don't think it matters that much because it has distracted everybody. But there may have been a man who walked the earth. I believe there was. But what he did, you can do, and others did before him. Others did before him. Buddha was a Christ. Krishna was a Christ. Vusamazulu Credo Mutwa was a Christ. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba was a Christ. Simeon Toko was a Christ. Simon Kimbangu was a Christ. So this is what we're supposed to become. We're not supposed to remain humans in victimhood waiting for somebody to save us. But if we accept the story and the programming that we are the chosen people and Jesus is coming to save us, or Yahusha is coming to save us, or the Messiah is on his way to save us, then we are going to be waiting forever. But if we say the Christ is the goal of the Torah, Christ is the goal of the Torah, to become Christ is the goal of the Torah, well, then how do we do it? And it's interesting because this stuff has never been hidden. It's just that people have never asked the question, well, how do I become Christ? Do I become Christ by eating these things or not eating these things? Do I become Christ by fasting and praying? Is there a physical technique that can help me to become the Christ? And if there is, where is it? The thing is that there are techniques out there, but that programming, that chosen people programming, that religion has people thinking that everyone else is evil and everyone else is going to hell. But if you just think about it, would you cast your child into hell for disobedience? I wouldn't. Would you kill your child for going against your laws and your ordinances? I would not. So you're telling me that a God that has more understanding of human nature than me, more understanding of the mind than I have, and how it works, and how people can be persuaded to do certain things and programmed to do certain things, and a person and a God that understands love more than me will cast me into hell because I went and I learned these techniques and sciences from other cultures. That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. But if you do venture out and stop being afraid to venture out, if you do venture out, you'll learn that there's a connection between Salat, Muslim Salat, and yoga. If you do venture out, you'll see that Elijah performed yoga postures. If you do venture out, you'll see that meditation is directly interacting with the God inside of you. You know, if you do venture out, you'll see that there are spiritual sciences, meaning we have one perspective of science. We think we put these chemicals together and that chemical together, and that's a science. Or we put these wires with this, and we can create artificial intelligent robots, and that's a science. But we never even thought to think about, what about the science in my body? What if I sit with my legs crossed and I can bring my right hemisphere and my left hemisphere together just by sitting with my legs crossed? What if I put my hands and twist my fingers a certain way and meditate on that? I can either quell certain energies in my body or enhance certain energies in my body. What about the science that's of me? What if I breathe like this and I could bring more energy into my body? What if I hold the breath for this long and I could store the energy in my body? There is a science that goes along with the body. And because it wasn't presented with the programming of the chosen people, and everyone else is evil except for those who believe this way, now nobody else even investigates. We don't investigate it. We take what is given to us, meaning they tell us Tantra is a perverted science about sex, because every time you see Tantra in the movies, these people are having different types of sex or different types of breathing in front of a corpse. And now you have this perception of it, but you haven't read about it. You haven't read about how your sexual energy is the strongest energy that you have. It is the energy of creation. And you don't have to only use it to create other humans. You can use it to create the Christ within you. You can raise that energy that you feel in your genitals. Starts to get hot. Your penis starts to get hard. Women start to get moist. You could take that energy and start raising it up through your body and bring it into your head. And you know it's an energy because you know how you feel when you see that girl and you're like, oh shit, that ass is fat. And girls, you know the energy because you know how you feel when you see a dude. And I don't know what y'all say when y'all see a dude, but you know the energy is there. So now we could say there's something happening in my genitals. There's an energy there. What if I raise that energy up? But it's not only there, you feel that that energy in the pit of your stomach when people are like scared, I guess. You feel an energy in your heart when your mate is mad at you, or when somebody leaves you, or when you fall in love with somebody. You feel that energy in your heart. What happens when you can't speak up about things that you know you need to speak up about? You get a frog in your throat. That's what they call it. It's an energy, it's a blocked energy in your throat. So you have these energies in your body, but what if you chose to manipulate the energies on purpose? Like Play-Doh. Play-Doh, you manipulate the Play-Doh and you come out with this sculpture. What if you manipulated the energy in your genitals and brought it up to your brain? What if you manipulated that fear energy that you feel in your knees, or you feel in the pit of your stomach when something happens, and you brought it up to your head? What if you manipulated that energy that you felt when you were attached to someone that you shouldn't be attached to, and now you guys aren't together? And instead of wallowing in heartbreak, you gathered yourself together and you took that energy out of your heart and you brought it up to your head. What if? This is the science. This is the science. So that's all I wanted to say, is that maybe we should I'm not giving no advice. This is why I can clearly see that the perspective in which the Abrahamic faiths are presented is mental programming and mind control. But that doesn't mean that they are not useful, because a tool is useful for what it's for. So if I use a knife to cut something, that's going to be very useful. I can cut this tree, I can cut this branch, I can shave it down, I can carve something. But if I try to use the knife to scoop things up, it's not going to work as well. I'm probably going to need a spoon for that. They say everybody is a genius in their own right. But if a fish spends its life trying to climb a tree, he's going to be considered stupid. So I say that to say that every tool is useful. We just need to use it as the tool is what the tool is for. So these Abrahamic faiths, and even as they have edited the Bible and translated the Bible and took these scriptures out and put these scriptures in, even as they've done all that, the essence is still there. So the tool is still useful. Maybe we just need to change our perspective in which we approach these tools so that we can get the highest use out of them. But so that's what I had to say today. Peace and elevation to all.